afternoon and welcome. Welcome to our regular meeting of the Health, Education, and Neighborhood Council Committee. It is Tuesday, August 14th at 1:05 p.m. and we are in City Hall, room 1010. We are joined by Councilmember Gil Cedillo and we have quorum, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I want to remind everybody in the audience, if anyone wants to speak on any of the items or has any general public comment, please fill out a comment card as soon as possible and bring it up to the front, please. At this point, I want to open up the public comment, and actually we have two speakers who signed up for an item, both on item number 2 as well as general public comments. So I'd like to call them up and give them 3 minutes each, and that is Brad Kane and Mark Masseri. Unless you guys have a community interest statement? No? Okay. So we'll give you guys 3 minutes each to speak on your item number 2, as well as general public comment. State your name and...
All right, my name is Brad Kane. I'm president of the Pico Neighborhood Council. I, along with Mark Masseri, participated in the Funding Equity Work Group. And unfortunately, the Funding Equity Work Group has not been able to write a report, let alone the initial report submitted by our chair was highly inaccurate. The things that we did accomplish, we brought copies of. They were motions passed by the Funding Equity Work Group on what we would refer to as the low-hanging fruit, the things that will help the neighborhood councils function better. And we were all essentially in agreement on moving the language translation associated costs to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. We were highly disappointed when we asked the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment what they did about shared space. 2 years ago, our neighborhood council couldn't get into a city facility. Herb Wesson intervened, got us in. There was a motion that said neighborhood councils are entitled to use city facilities. And Dunn's position was, well, actually, we just catalog it. We don't inform the neighborhood councils of this. We don't assist them in anything. And I question that since their mandate is to assist. And so apparently we need to reinforce that. We also have had substantial problems, at least my neighborhood council has, in getting into LAUSD facilities. We actually pay for them in 3 sessions in a row. We stopped using them because they wouldn't unlock the doors for us. So we're asking for a high-level memorandum of understanding reinforcing the idea that the neighborhood councils are worthy, I guess, because if no one's done the statistics, but I think they're the greatest recipient of neighborhood council funds out there. So we should get some respect for that. And we ask for a return to the ability to roll over funds rather than use it or lose it. That was one of the main items that we pushed. The next item is that, let's see, we would like the definition of stakeholders to be revised. If you've read the Los Feliz Ledger, which may not cover all of Los Angeles, but there's been shenanigans in the elections. People like Abundant Housing have been caught, according to Los Feliz Ledger, funding front groups to get people to go in and vote and say they're stakeholders because they go to the public library but they don't have library cards, to vote in the elections against neighborhood council candidates that may not be for overdevelopment. And since we have a pending election coming up, and item number 2 reflects that we're preparing for it, we cannot wait for Bonk to tinker with the definition. I think we really need to clamp down on, you may be able, if you're a community stakeholder, to participate.
Thank you, but we'll read on that. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, Brad laid the groundwork. When we were involved in this group, we had 8 meetings, and then it started with 4, extended to 8, and now there's 2 more to kind of codify a report. But about the 6th or 7th meeting, Brad and I put together these motions to just say, let's get something down on paper. And a lot of this stuff, as it says in the cover letter, you're already covering in certain ways. You're looking at rollover, you're looking at these things, and we acknowledge that. And there's some other things like, we talk about LAUSD, similar to the Memorandum of Understanding you did with RAP. It would be swell because almost every neighborhood has a school in it. And but it has to be a high-level understanding of how it's going to work so people don't show up and there's nobody there to open the door and they say, oops, sorry, what can we do? that would be very helpful. What we gleaned about equity and this idea of equity across neighborhood councils is you have to kind of level the playing field. If one council has $10,000 in translation expenses and another one does not, you can't even begin to talk about equity until you equalize those things. So there's a recommendation that says, hey, maybe you should take this onerous burden off some councils and they'll get, quote, closer to being equal to begin with. And then you can start talking about a formula that distributes the money by something that everyone agrees is equitable. The second, so what we did was, that was the first part of the triages. These are things you can do right now, tomorrow. The second part of the three motions that were approved was, we just have to tell you, you're never going to get anywhere near equity unless you talk seriously about the subdivision policy. Subdivision policy creates a moving target with no real metrics. And without any real metrics, there's no way you're going to come up with a formula, because it can be 2,300 one day, 23,000 another, 34, 36. It's all over the map. And our recommendation is, because it's legislative and enrolled into the LA Community Code, the best thing you can do is freeze it. Put a moratorium on it, however it's done, because it's been done in the past, to say we're going to call timeout on this and really reevaluate it. We understand that there's proposals already submitted on what to do about the subdivision policy. They're not going to get you there. We've read them all. They'll get you closer, but 2 years later, a whole other group of people will be looking at it again and figuring out, how do we get this to work? Because it needs some thought, and we think it needs some thought not only from the 10,000-foot view, but from the view from the trenches, from the people who actually have to administrate it and work from it, and you'd be well served to kind of get that point of view, as in addition to other points of view that are looking at it from a very high-level perspective. The third motion that's in there were just things that we wanted to include that said, this is how we got here, because we were never quite sure how this would be presented. So we said, look, these are known knowns, that you need to look at these things, and we set up a foundational base to support the eventual report, which may or may not get approved. As of last night, it's not looking good, so we felt this was time to bring it to you guys, because we intended it to be submitted to both. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Brad. One second. Brad, you mentioned you did not finish the funding equity work group report, or I couldn't in the beginning.
What happened is, at the last meeting, our chair decided he was going to write the report. The bonk said, no, his report does not stand for the funding equity, which has been voted on.
Uh-huh.
They then waited 3 weeks to schedule a meeting on 5 days' notice for the funding equity. They couldn't get quorum. So then they said, okay, well, we're not going to extend the August 20 deadline to do this intelligently. So we're going to give you Monday last night and Thursday tonight, or 2 nights from now, to do it. They couldn't again get quorum on short notice. And so it appears that they may not have a final report voted on.
So this report is?
This is just basically communication from the public indicating what was passed and agreed on, and nothing more than what was passed and agreed on, that speak to elements we think are going to be necessary to create equity and create other things that will make the system run smoother.
Well, thank you. I very appreciate your interest and all of your comments. Anyone hearing this meeting online, as well as yourselves, anyone could input. It doesn't, whether it's from the funding equity group or whether it's from you personally as an individual citizen or individual neighborhood council member, you could definitely forward your thoughts, your suggestions, as you guys always do, to my office or to Bonk or to Dunn directly. If you have any other suggestions, but a lot of things you did bring up are the issues, as you know, we're working on. And I just recently introduced a motion on subdivisions. So there will be a temporary hold, and we'll get you a copy of that. So you could take a look at that, and you could also provide some feedback on that as well.
That's excellent. Because we presented this, we wanted to really wait for this to get through the bonk process.
Yeah.
But that was in May, and now we're in August. So as individuals, we're presenting this to you, and you could look through it. And
great.
We know a lot lines up with what you're already doing, but in case there are other things, there they are.
So thank you, and that closes public comment. Very much appreciate the input. And there are no more cards, so general public comment is closed, and the multiple agenda items have all now been heard. So I'd like to move to item number 1, which relates to the reappointment of Ms. Betty Wilson to the Commission on Disability. Mr. Ciolette, Paul, can you? Sorry, I read that in for you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Ms. Betty Wilson to the Commission on Disability.
Great. Is Ms. Wilson in the audience? No. Okay. That's fine. Seeing that she's not here, does any member, Cedillo, are you fine with the appointment? Reappointment?
I am fine with the appointment. I worked with her some 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
No.
So, yes, the answer is yes.
Great. So I'd like to move forward with the reappointment, and Mr. Cedillo seconds. So moved. So item number 2, and there is no public comment for this item. So item number 2.
Mr. Chairman, item number 2, verbal update from the General Manager of the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment on the preparations for the 2019 Neighborhood Council elections.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. So, Mrs. Liu, can you provide us with an update on your department's preparations for the upcoming neighborhood council elections?
Good afternoon, council members. Gracie Liu, General Manager for the Department of Neighbor Empowerment. I'm joined by Anne-Marie Holman and Arn Abedian, who are part of my outreach team, and will also be available to speak on our plans. So we have, in this fiscal year, built upon some of the outreach that we prepared for last fiscal year. We have already held multiple outreach gatherings throughout the city, both in June and July, that allowed us to reach about 200 board members from 72 neighborhood councils to talk to them about election outreach and outreach methods. Currently, we are preparing a report to submit to City Council to request the transfer of funds from the UB of $300,000 that was set aside by the City Council to allow us to conduct neighborhood council election outreach. There's an additional $25,000 too that is from another fund from the UB that's online voting. Some leftover funds from online voting from last fiscal years is also available, so we'll be requesting that as well. With these funds, our plan is to do a combination of low-tech to high-tech election outreach, from working with nonprofits, schools, and other community organizations to partner to do outreach to the community about neighborhood councils and the elections and the importance of candidates coming on board for the new generation of neighborhood councils, and up to digital ads throughout the city that we are planning for. And the outreach that we're going to do, we really want to separate it into 2 buckets. The first would just be a general citywide outreach, which we anticipate about $350,000 going towards that. And then $50,000 would be focused on 30 neighborhood councils that in the combination of in the past 2016 elections, either weren't even able to have elections because they didn't get enough candidates, or they had low voter turnout, to those that are in exhaustive efforts currently and may need more assistance. And so we want to focus specific funding on that in order to help those neighborhood councils additionally with their outreach. I can talk about more specifics about how we're going to separate those two pots, like the citywide versus the targeted. But I'm happy to take questions if you have any at this point generally about what I've talked about.
Yeah, so just a few questions. Well, first off, you know what, let me really thank Dunn and City Clerk for, it wasn't an election, it was a subdivision election, but it was, I think, in the history of neighborhood councils, the largest turnout. And I think for the most part, I mean, I know there were little problems here and there because of such tremendous volume. I think something like 20,000 people voted.
Yes.
So, and I'm talking about the WCKNC subdivision election. But for the most part, you guys did a great job. Any lessons learned from that? I mean, because building. I would love for us to build on that excitement and see if we could replicate that throughout the entire city. I know it'll be more difficult for yourself and the city clerk, but I think that's what our democratic process is. So any lessons learned or?
Well, we're still looking at exactly what happened, but I will say that obviously, it just goes to prove what I think the city clerk, Holly Walcott, always says, that if you have an issue that the community cares about, they're going to turn out for it. And in this case, the subdivision was the main issue. And for us, the department, we're looking at how the nonprofits in the area really helped mobilize some of that outreach and some of that excitement around the election. And so that's why we are really interested in partnering with nonprofits around the city. And we actually have reached out to those nonprofits that did do a lot of mobilization in the Worcester Center Koreatown subdivision. And they will be joining us to do a collaboration. So, and we already know in terms of just the actual election itself and how do we cut down on the 4 to 5 hour wait. Luckily we have a pilot that's been approved or at least moved on to City Council for subdivision election, for online voting, and that could be something that we explore. How do we make the voting process easier? But I guess many thanks to go to City Clerk and their team, and to our staff as well, who literally stayed many hours past the closing of the polls, and we didn't leave till like midnight just to make sure that we processed everybody. So if you like, I can have Anne-Marie speak on some of the digital advertising that we're planning on doing. And also, Aaron can speak about Canva, which is an online tool where we'll be providing templates for all neighborhood councils so that they can easily do outreach because we will have already designed everything.
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Anne-Marie Holman. I do design, social media, and education for the department. And I got involved with the neighborhood council system at first as the land use chair of the Echo Park Neighborhood Council in your district, actually, Mr. Cedillo. And I've taught at the Congress of Neighborhoods for the past 4 years. I've taught digital outreach, and I've also taught public relations, DIY, for neighborhood councils. In my experience teaching there at the Congress, I began to notice that a lot of the neighborhood councils had really different needs that would go beyond the scope of what I could cover in a 75-minute class at the Congress. Since the neighborhood council system was predicated on the fact that every community of Los Angeles has different needs, one of my goals was to try and address that in terms of the outreach toolkits and guides that we developed for the neighborhood councils going forward for the 2018-2019 year. Toward that end, I've developed printable guides for how to use Twitter, how to use Facebook, how to get started on Nextdoor, which has been one of our most powerful platforms, guides to using hashtags, guides to creating short links. And then I've also created some customizable tools. For example, there's been a trifold in English and Spanish that introduces whoever receives it to what a neighborhood council is. It also lists a list of popular city services, which creates an incentive to keep it. I believe that Palms actually got one. There's also a bulk mailer version of this. We create the artwork for free for any neighborhood council that orders one, and then they just have to take the artwork to their printer, and we even give them a guide for working with a printer fruitfully and making future edits so that way they'll be able to ride off on the bicycle with the training wheels on it, so to speak. Another tool that has been in motion over the summer are the one-on-one social media consultations. They started out at half an hour. They're now running about 45 minutes to an hour because that's proven to be a better time frame for most people's needs. But this has allowed me to talk to people about everything from getting started on Nextdoor to how to create a set of graphics that you can reuse for different social media purposes, to how to do things like create Instagram stories and how you archive them against future public records requests.
Aaron, did you want to talk about Canva?
My name is Arna Bedian. I've been involved.
Could I ask a quick question?
okay.
Sorry.
Oh,
So
certainly.
all of these, that sounds great. So is the department's going to have all these resources available for neighborhood councils, but the department's also going to do outreach yourself, right, for the neighborhood councils or all the neighborhood councils, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We'll be doing outreach on behalf of the entire neighborhood council system as well to help increase awareness among Angelenos that have never yet heard of the system.
Great.
Yep. So we do know, too, that with the resources that we've been given, that neighborhood councils will still need to conduct some outreach themselves, which is why we wanted to make sure these templates are available. So Arn will talk about the Canva templates.
Hello. My name is Arna Bedian, and I've been doing outreach for neighborhood council elections since 2014. And every time we were doing outreach, we were always asked for templates from neighborhood councils, because neighborhood councils are volunteers and they don't all have graphic designers for them. So to design bus benches, flyers, bus shelter creatives, they would either have to try to do it themselves or go hire somebody. And doing templates really is a difficult thing because not everybody has the same programs to use. So if I create a template in Microsoft Word, somebody may not have it, or in a design software, they might not have the expertise to use it. So for this time around, we started using an online platform called Canva. And Canva is for those that don't know any design skills. So even if you don't have any design skills, you can design beautiful artwork. The difference between our account and other accounts is an enterprise account. So we've purchased an enterprise account that we can give one user to each neighborhood council, and they can use our templates, which we've already created, and we've created one for bus bench, bus shelter, for Facebook advertisement, for lawn signs, and they can use these templates, and it's sized perfectly for that type of advertisement. And all they have to do is add in their own branding, their own color if they want, or use our branding and our colors and send it to print. So that's what Canva is, and that's what we're rolling out very soon.
You know, regarding recruitment of candidates, so how will the department do aggressive recruiting for actual candidates?
So part of it is using a lot of these online tools to make people aware of the neighbor council system. We've already in the past year conducted 123 neighbor council 101s throughout the city. We just to get people aware of that. And then we've partnered with the nonprofits and community-based organizations, academics, in order to get them ready so that when we are ready to do candidate recruitment, they're going to be there to help us. And obviously we're going to also rely on city council members and mayor staff to also assist in that.
Sorry, you know, for the record, we are being, Mr. Herman has entered the meeting and is being very disruptive. So, Mr. Herman, I am giving your first and final warning. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. So,
no problem.
You were saying.
So a combination of both, you know, our advertising for it and asking those who, you know, the nonprofits and community organizations have membership, targeting their membership. We're really building on some of the partnerships we've had in the last year in order to get ready to that when the central area goes first for their candidate filing, which will start in December. We will be there several months ahead of time trying to groom those folks, potential candidates, through our partnerships and through our online advertisements.
So candidate filing starts December to...
Well, it staggers because there's typically 12 election regions, but now there's going to be 13 with online voting. So those candidate filing times stagger and are different for each one.
So do you have some sort of a goal or some sort of a benchmark on the number of candidates you want to see per seat or per council? I mean, and also what was the number last time? So how do you make that comparison? So
for us, when we were tracking information from last time. We were tracking more total voters. We can't break down how many candidates there were for last time versus open seats. I think for this time, we're looking at what's realistic, and we're thinking about, if we can get at least 66% of the open seats to have contested elections, that would be a huge win. I know initially we were thinking, okay, if we can get at least one candidate for each seat, because some neighbor councils, they can't even get enough to have quorum. But those are the ones that we're hoping that we'll be able to really help by focusing on them as one of the targeted neighbor councils. So if we can get that percentage of neighbor council seats to be contested, that's actually a big win for us.
So your goal is to have 66% of all seats to be contested.
That's correct.
What was it last year? Is there some sort of comparison?
I don't have that number in front of me, but unless Anna Marie, did you have it? But we can get that for you, and it'll be in our final report.
So how did you come to 66%?
Well, we were looking at realistically how many resources that we have, how many open seats we expected, and we were trying to get above 50%. We're like, okay, we're going to go for a aspirational goal and go for 66%.
Great. Is this the deal? Do you have any questions?
I only have one question that's always about how we get more engagement from the many other language-speaking residents of our city. And so what strategies do you have? We speak 100 plus more languages and very significant populations we saw. And I was wondering what the experience was with the huge meeting with the Korean community, what resources you had. There was a discussion earlier about the need for, in some areas, to have additional resources for bilingual equipment. And so, obviously, this varies throughout the city. And so my questions are, so what strategies are you preparing to employ so that you can have that type of outreach to the rest of the city?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. So the first thing that we've done back in September of last year, we did a demographic study of who's on the neighbor councils to begin with. And now we're completing a demographic list of everyone in each neighborhood council. So each neighborhood council can kind of compare and see, okay, are their boards representative in the first place? So I think just having that knowledge and being aware of who's not at the table is important. For us, we've set aside significant amount of funding for translation, interpretation services, so that we can target communities that we know that are not represented in neighborhood councils. And all of our materials, templates, will be translated into Spanish, Korean, and Chinese. And if we get additional requests for other languages, we'll definitely work with that to provide those templates, and then for us also to use as well as the neighbor councils. We do know that we'll be approaching probably radio in some communities in language to talk about neighbor councils, why neighbor councils are important, why people should be getting involved. I think ultimately, though, it's going to go hand in hand with whatever is determined from the motion about funding and translation for neighbor councils, because it does us no good to bring these folks onto neighbor councils and for them not to have the resources to continue to work on the neighbor councils effectively in language.
Thank you, Mr. Cedillo, and we already had a comment on this item, so this is just a verbal report back, so we're just going to move on to the next item. This is the receive and file. So for items number 3, 4, and 5, I'd like to take it on consent.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. And item number 6, Paul, can you read that in, please? Mr. Herman, please. We had the public comment as well as for item number 2. We gave you 3 minutes earlier, and we closed out public comment. Yeah. So, yeah, so public comment was already fulfilled. So, and we took it both of them at the same time for multiple items. Sorry about that. Sorry. Talk to you later, Mark. Yep.
Okay.
So item number 6.
Item number 6, report from the CAO relative to proposed amendments to the evidence-based program service provider contracts to allocate additional funds for the program period April 1, 2018 through March 31, 2019.
Thank you. And we have one comment card on this. Mr. Herman, you got a minute?
Nigga, 1 minute. So, motherfucker, city administrative fucking officer, a fucking report to the fucking relative fucking proposed amendments. I'll tell you what the fuck about city administrative fucking evidence-based program. I'm the provider. I'm the allocating provider for the motherfucking additional funds for your fucking program, Rue. On April 1st, 2018 through 2019, I am the motherfucker city administrator. I am the Ralph M. motherfucker Brown Act. You know what that means? 54,950 to 54,963. In question, there's a point in there that says I have the right to criticize a white nigger politician who raped a woman some time ago. So evidence-based program is I, motherfucker. I am God. And God brings me here to tell you, white-ass motherfucker from UCLA, next time you get in a car with a woman unconscious and want to fuck her, you put a condom on. Put one in your fucking mouth, motherfucker, because that's how I roll, nigga. LA, hoorah.
Thank you. Mr. Cedillo, I would like to move this item.
So moved.
So moved. Thank you. Seeing there's no other business before us, this meeting is adjourned. And thank you to the departments and all the